And now we're on Daf Pei Alpha and Beis Beit Shammai Savri. We don't have to be choshesh for bia, even though we know he had bia, but not for bia's kedushin. Why? Because on them also bilas a bilas nus. Menastam he had a bilas nus. He didn't have kavanah l'shem kedushin. Beis Hill Savri ain't on them also bilas a bilas nus. His be'ilu is l'shem kedushin. And menastam it means that with this bia, and we have testimony to the effect he had bia within the fundaki, he was makadish, and therefore she needs another get. But if we never saw, says Rabbi Yochanan, that they had be'ila, even Beis Hill would be moda she'ena tzricha men get shein. Because here we have a svek. One suffix is, did they have be'ila? Number two, even if they did have be'ila, did they have a bilas nus or a bilas shem kedushin? And here even Beis Hill could be made. Tonight, the Gemara asks a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. We have a mission. Umodim Beis Hill concede to Beis Hill Beit Shammai. Binis gash min ha'eris she'ena tzricha men get sheini shein libo gasva ve'i ra'uah bira shera'uah shenivela mali min ha'erisin mali min ha'suin. Even if they had never consummated their marriage, but nevertheless now we have Adam that they had be'ila. So what's the svara to say? No, we're going to make a distinction between this gashim and erisin and his gashim and asuin. I mean, just like in the case of this gashim and asuin, Beis Hill require a get because ain't other most of bilas nus, and therefore we should apply that same principle in his gashim and not erisin. So why do Beis Hillel, according to Rabbi Yochanan, concede that in his gashim and erisin she doesn't need a get? What about ain't other most of bilas nus? And you're talking about a case of ra'uah shenivala. Ella says Gemara masnisin bit shalora u'ashenivala. Rabbi Yochanan was not commenting on the Mishnah. He was commenting on the Machlokas Beis Hill Beit Shammai independent of the Mishnah. But in the Mishnah, we're talking about a case of lora u'ashenivala, and therefore we're going to have a controversy between Beis Hill and Beit Shammai. Dafka in the case of this Gashim and Asuin, and Beis Hill say that Mistama Bala, even though we didn't have Adam to testify that they had a relationship, but nevertheless in the case of Libo Gospel, like Nizgasha Min HaNesuin, we're going to assume that they had beer, and therefore Beis Hillel are going to require a get. But in a case of Nizgasha Min HaErison, and there's no Libo Gospel, and we don't have Adam to testify that we witnessed the Maisa Bia, then we can assume Mistamalo Bala. It's ein Libo Gospel. Rabbi Yochanan Diyomar, Rabbi Yochanan holds about the Machlokas Beis Hill Beit Shammai is only in a case of Ra'uah Shenivala. He doesn't mean to explain that the Machlokas Beis Hill Beit Shammai in our Mishnah is in a case of Ra'uah Shenivala. No. In our Mishnah is Lo Ra'uah Shenivala. But Rabbi Yochanan holds ki Hai Tana, like the Tana of the Brisa who rejects our Mishnah, the Sanya of the Brisa Omer Rav Shimon ben Elazar lo nechku Beis Hill Beit Shammai al shelo ra'uah shenivala. In that case, says Rabbi Yochanan, based on this Brisa of Rav Shimon ben Elazar, that in a case where lo ra'uah shenivala, even Beis Hill agree ain't a tzricha men get. Why? Because we assume that he didn't have beer with him. Alma nechleku, in what case is there a gigantic battlefield between Beis Hill and Beit Shammai? Al shara u'ashenivel. Beit Shammai omer ad mosa bilas nus, Beis Hill omer ein ad mosa bilas nus. Which means that according to Beis Hill, we assume once we know they had beer that his kavanah was l'shem kiddush. Gemara clarifies. So now you're telling me that according to Rabbi Yochanan and in the Brisa according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Beis Hill never disagreed with Beit Shammai in the case of Lo Ra'uah Shenivala. And now you're interpreting the Mishnah as Lo Ra'uah Shenivala b'mai piligi. So what is this far of this machlokas? And the Gemara clarifies, Be'ika Eidi Yicha V'lek Eidi Bia. There are two witnesses that saw them going together in a closed, locked room, but they didn't see the bia. We cannot upgrade the status of these Adam as if the Adam saw the bia. After all, they didn't see the bia. that once there's testimony on Yichud, then it's considered like Eidus on Bia, because we assume for sure he had a relationship with her during this time of Yichud. And we have a principle according to Beis Hillel, Ein on the Mosa Bilas Bilas Nus. Once we assume that the Yichud was Bia, and the Edom are now testifying on the Bia, we have to assume that maybe he had a Bia L'Shem Kedushin, and therefore she needs a second get. Well, Modim, but Beis Hillel, Mod to Beit Shammai, bin his Garshim and Eris and Shein Tzrichem and a get. We're not going to be choshish they had a relationship with her if they never had libo gaspa, they were never together, and they never had conjugal relations, and therefore came and shame libo gaspa lo amrinan hein eidei bia, that these eidei yichud are testifying on bia. Frek the Gemara mi amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Does Rabbi Yochanan hold like the brisa that Beis Hillel moda? They can see that if Lora ush and nivala, she does not need a second get for a amar Rabbi Yochanan. We have a principle of Yochanan in Psak Halacha, that Halacha is Tam Mishnah. Whenever we have an unidentified, anonymous Tana in a Mishnah, we pass it like that Mishnah. No one argues with it. And now our Mishnah is talking about a case where they didn't see, the Edom did not see a Bia, and we record a machlokes between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. How can you say that Rabbi Yochanan will argue against the Stam Mishnah and accept the Brisa when Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that Allah is Stam Mishnah? Where answers Amoroi Ninu, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yochanan. There are two views within the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan. There are those who have a view that Rabbi Yochanan holds Halach Stam Mishnah, but Rabbi Bar Bachana holds in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that if the Machlokas son is Bera'ur Shenivala, then Rabbi Yochanan would not say such a thing. He would not apply the principle Halach Stam Mishnah, and therefore it's very possible that it'll pass like the Bryce. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Beis. And now we're talking about a case of a get that the Rabbanon established for Kohanim. It's called a get makusha, in which we fold up the get over and over again so that we have Edom signed on each fold. And the reason for this is that it's going to take a long time to prepare such a get. And we're hoping in the meantime that the Kohen who wants to divorce his wife might cool off, change his mind, and decide that he doesn't want to divorce his wife, because with regard to a Kohen, divorce is final. So the Mishnah says, Knasa. A man married a woman. After she was divorced from her husband, who was a Kohen, the get kereach. Get kereach is the opposite of a get makushar. A get makushar is where on each one of the folds we have another aid sign. A get kereach, on the other hand, is like a classic get, where there are two signatures on the bottom of the get, and that's possible in the case of a Kohen. And now she receives a get kereach from her husband, her Kohen, and she got married to someone else, but the get is possible. So the Mishnah establishes we have a Mishnah back on Daf Ayin Tes in the case of a woman who got married against the halacha, and we impose upon her many, many different penalties. She forfeits her ksuba, her peros, etc., etc. And the same halach of knas is going to apply here to this woman who received an invalid get from her husband, a Kohen. She got a get kereach instead of getting a get makusha. The Mishnah now clarifies which edim are ksherim to sign on a get kereach. Get kereach kol mashlim in olam. Basically, in a case of a get kereach, what you can do is you can be mashlim the get. Okay, so let's talk about hashlama beget kereach. A get makusha, we said, is he writes a line of the get, or maybe two lines of the get, folds it over, and sews it up in such a way that an aide could sign on the fold. And then the sofer again writes another line or two in the get, again folds it up, and another aide signs on the fold. And this goes on and on. So that's called a get makusha. What's a get kereach? A get kereach is a get that was delivered by a Kohen to his wife, in which the Eidim did not sign on each one of the ksharim. Right? We said that you fold over and sew that part, a line or two of the get, and on the kesher, on the folds, that's where the Eidim sign. But if the Eidim did not sign on the folds, that's called a get kereach. And it's basically missing Eidim. Why? Because the number of Eidim on a get makusha should be exactly identical to the number of folds. Here, we have a case where ksharav, the folds, are greater than the signatures of the Eidim. There are more ksharim than there are Eidim. That's called a get kereach. And now, we want to be mashlim to get kereach, which means that we want to invite Eidim ksherim to sign on the ksharim so that there would be more signatures or equal number of signatures as the ksharim. However, we really, on a doraisa level, we don't need to be mashlim to get kereach because that's not a get gets given by a Kohen. So what we're allowed to do is we be mashlim to get kereach and add signatures to the folds of psulei edus, meaning krovim, avodim, gazlonim, and the get is kosher divrei bananas. Rabbi Akiva omer no. Ein mashlimin olav ela krovim aruim lo'od b'makom acher. We're only allowed to be mashlim to get kereach with psulei edus if they are basically Eidim ksherim. Here they're not ksherim because they're related to the Baal. But they're not gazlonim, they're not avodim, who are mufka and gansin from Eidim. These are only Eidim who are possible because of kurva. Eze get kireach, and as we said before, kol ksharav merubav me'ed. Gemara says, my time to get kireach. Why do they possibly get kireach? After all, the Torah only requires the signature of two Eidim. And there are two Eidim signed in this get. And the Gemara is going to clarify that if there are so many ksharim, it makes sense to assume that the Baal invited and commissioned more Eidim than were required. According to the basic requirement is two Eidim, but he commissioned more than two Eidim. And how many Eidim did he commission to sign his get? Lefi minyan ksharim. We count up the number of folds. And if there was no chasima on one of the folds, then the Chacham is saying, Gzeir Mishum Kulchem. We have to worry about a case where the Baal said to a large group of Eidim, Kulchem Chismu, all of you should sign on the get. And there the halacha is, even on a doraisa level, that if they didn't all sign the get is possible. And now we're afraid that a get kereach is going to be confused with Kulchem, because we think that the number of ksharim reflects the number of Eidim that he wants to sign in his get. The Mishnah says, get kireach hakol mashlim, and all of according to Benanas. Rabbi Kiva says, no, only krov maruyim lo'od b'makom acher. So Gemara asks Rabbi Kiva, Eved, my time alone. Why does Rabbi Akiva invalidate the signature of the Eved to be mashlim the chasimos on a get kereach? And the Gemara answers the asul and meimar kosher li'edus. People will think that if Beis Din is allowing an aide to sign on a get, the conclusion is obvious. It must be that an aide who's an eved is nevertheless kosher li'edus. And we know that an eved is not kosher li'edus. He has the same status as an isha. So now, Karav Nami Osel Meima Kosher li'edus. Why isn't Rabbi Akiva? Are you still there, Ira? Why isn't Rabbi Akiva? No, I lost you.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Oh,
Sorry,
you
my
lost me.
microphone.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm here.
sorry. So why is Rabbi Akiva makil and leniently allows a karov to sign on an and be mashlim and a get kireach? After all, people are going to say that a karov is kosher liedus. Same logic that he applied to Eved, be consistent, applied to a karov. Ella, you're going to have to say that Rabbi Akiva is not choshesh, that people will mistakenly conclude that apostle liedus is kosher liedus. Everybody knows the laws of Eden. Rabbi Akiva says in Eved, why doesn't he allow an Eved? He disqualifies him from signing on a get kireach. Rabbi Akiva is really choshesh that people are going to allow this Eved to marry a Jewish girl. An Eved is not allowed to marry a Jewish girl. It's a lavdo raisa. And they're going to see that the Eved signs on the get. You know what? They're going to say, you know what? This is not the Eved that's a classic Eved. If he was a classic Eved, he'd be Posel Yedus. And the fact that they let him sign on the get means that he's not Posel Yedus. It means they checked him out and they found out that he has Yichus and he's not an Eved. And they're going to marry him off to a Bas Yisrael. Gemara says that's impossible. Gazlan debar Yuchsin hulis kasha. Why does Rabbi Akiva exclude a Gazlan from signing to be mashlim on a get kereah? After all, he has Yuchsin. He's allowed to marry Bas Yisrael. So to say that this whole psul in which Rabbi Akiva invalidated an Eved is because of Yuchsin, that you can't apply that to Gazlan, and yet a Gazlan, according to Rabbi Akiva, is excluded from signing on the get Mekushma. Although Tanan Rabbi Akiva Omer ein mashlimin olav l'krov v'ruyim lahoyd b'makom acher karavin Gazlan lo. Clearly, Rabbi Akiva disqualifies a Gazlan from signing on a get kirech, even though there's no chash of Yuchsin. So we have to go back to the drawing board and come up with another thesis as to why Rabbi Akiva disqualifies an Eved. Ela Eved hainu time of the Osi l'meim shechrurei shachare. We're afraid that the people seeing that the Eved signed on this get will come to the conclusion that the Adon, the owner of the Eved, the master of the Eved, already gave a get shechur, and therefore he's kosher liedus. Maybe the people will mistakenly think that if we're allowing a Gazlan to sign this get, it must be that he did tshuva. Love Ashkorim and so forth. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva consistently had to disqualify a Gazlan for the same reason that he disqualified an Eved, because the Eved could become kosher and the Gazlan could become kosher. But Karov Ma'ikal Meimar, what are you going to say? Are the people going to come to the conclusion that somehow Karov is not a Karov? Karov Kuliyama Yadi the Karovu. It's very public knowledge that he's a Karov. And we don't have to worry about the takola that maybe people will say that Rabbi Akiva was machshir a karov as an aid. Rav Zera, Rabbi Bar Shilta, Rav Hamnuna, Saba, Rav Adabar, Rav Get, Kereach, Sharav, Shiva, V'edav, Shisha. What's the deal? If they folded the get 7 times and there are only 6 signatures on the get, or Shisha V'edav Chamisha, they folded up 6 and there are only 5. Chamisha V'edav Arba, Arba V'edav Shlosha. Ad kan machlokes ben nanas Rabbi Akiva. All these cases will come under the controversy between Ben Nanas, who holds that you can be mashlim the chasimos on the get kereah, even with psuli edus, including an eved and including a karov. And Rabbi Akiva would say, no, you can only be mashlim it with a karov. Avol ksharav shloshav edav shnayim. Let's go down to the bottom of the barrel. There are 3 folds that were sewn up, and there are only 2 Edom signed. Divri akol ein mashlimin olav karov. Even Ben Nanas is going to have to concede to Rabbi Akiva that we cannot sign as the 3rd aid a apostle yedus. Why? The minimum number of Eidim signed on a get Makushar is 3. We're hoping that until he finds the Baal, who's a Kohen, 3 Eidim to sign his get, will cool off. Sometimes a Kohen gets angry. We all get angry. And Machmas Takonazu, this third aid is now like the first 2 Eidim. He's part of the basic requirement of the get. So Gemara asks, Rabbi Zera Rabbi Bar Sheil, for Michti, I don't understand. Kol Shlosha we get Makusha Kishnayim B'Pashut come. The third aid that's adding a signature to a get Makushar is equal to the 2 Eidim of the get Pasha. Uma Hasam. And just like there in the case of a get Pasha Karov Lo, we cannot sign on a get Pasha with regard to 2 Eidim. A Karov is Afchach Nami. So too to get Makushar, Karov Lo. We should not be able to be Maksha the get by signing up 1 aid of the 3 who is a Karov. So why was Rav Ada Bar Ava Makshir a Karov? Meaning, if he's a Karov to the Baal, then we can sign him up as the third aid to be Mashal to get Makusha that only has 2 signatures. But why? I mean, after all, you yourself formulated the principle that the third aid in a get Makusha is like the 2 aidim in a get Pasha, and a Karv therefore has to be possible. Amalei, so Rav Ashil to respond to Rav Zera's attack. I had the same question as you. Ushil to Rav Hamnuna, yes, Rav Hamnuna. And Rav Hamnuna didn't know an answer. And therefore, yes, Rav Ada Bar Ava. And Rav Ada Bar Ava finally gave the answer. Hanach l'shlosha b'mekushar delavdo raisa. Don't equate 3 Eidim in a get Makusha to 2 Eidim in a get Pasha. Because the third signature in a get Makusha is only D'Rabbanan. And therefore, we can be more lenient in the D'Rabbanan. And we can accept an aid even if the signature of this aid is the signature of an aid Karov. As long as he's not possible for other eidos like a Gazler or an Evet. But again, Pashut, those 2 eidim are the basic requirement of Torah, Pishnayim eidim Yokum Tovar, and therefore a Karov is possible to sign. Tanya Nami Hachi will bring a brisa to support Rav Ada Bar Ava. Get Kereach Sharav Shiva V'Edav Shisha. Shisha V'Edav Chamisha. Chamisha V'Edav Arba. This is like Chad Gadi. Like Echad V'Yadem. Arba V'Edav Shlosha. Adkan Machlokes Benanes Rabbi Akiva but Hishlim Olav Eved Benanes Omer Kosher Vavlad Kosher Rabbi Akiva Omer Possible Vlad Mamser Aval Ksharv Shlosha V'Edav Shnayim Divrei Akol Ein Mashlimim Olav Ela Karo. So we see that even the third aid to be Mashlim and get Kereah could be a Karo. Rabbi Yosef Masni, he had a different version of Rabbi Zera in the name of Rabbi Bar Bar Shilta. And according to his version, it says, Havel Ksharov. If there were 3 Ksharim and only 2 witnesses signed on 2 out of the 3 Ksharim, everybody agrees that the third signature has to be a kosher. Not the way we understood in the first Lishna that Ela Karov, that you can sign a Karov as the third aid. No, we need an aid kosher. For Sanya, the Gemara asks and raises an objection of Yosef. After all, the Brisa says, E Mashliman Olav Ela Karov. So how could Rabbi Yossi go and change the word Karov to kosher? And the Gemara answers, Tini kosher. Let's make the change in the Brisa. Instead of the word Karov, cross that out and fill in the word kosher. Rabbi Yochanan. Here's another halacha with regard to Hashlomas Gate Kereach. Lo huchsheru bo ela eid echad kara bilvat. Yes, if you have to add a signature to be mashlim the Get Kereach, you can add a karo, but only 1 karo. I will tray to add 2 signatures that are krovim lo. Why? Dilma asili kiyume betray krovim v'chad kosher. Maybe when this get comes in up to Bezdin, and Bezdin now has to be Makayim the get by verifying signatures. Maybe they'll choose dafka those two signatures of the Krovim. And when the Baal will say, wait a minute, this get is a hoax, it's a counterfeit, we'll go ahead and we'll disprove him, and we will validate the get based on the two Eidim Krovim by comparing their signatures to other stars that they signed on, and we're going to be machshir the get based on these two Eidim. So the kiyum get will be through these two Eidim that are psulim. Basically, they didn't realize that these two Eidim are Krovim. They're going to be machshir the get shelo Gittin. And in truth, one of the two Eidim is kosher, but both of them are not kosher, and they're relying on these two Eidim to be machshir the get. Therefore, we cannot allow for the Hashlama get Kerech more than one relative, which means that even if they were Makayim, let's say 3 Chasimos, there are always going to be guaranteed that 2 out of the 3 are Eidim Ksherim. Amarav Ashi Masnisa Namitaika. From a brisa, we could also prove this conclusion of Rabbi Yochanan that we can only be machshir a get Kerech with 1 Eid Korah, but not with 2 Eidim Krovim. And here we turn to Daf Pei Beis. The Komedalig Vitani Chad Chad Shmamina. The Tana in the Brisa, when he formulates the scope of the machlokas between Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva, so he goes down and he skips. And in each case, when he goes down from 7 to 6, 6 to 5, he always has one signature missing. Why did he give a bigger fish? There are 2 signatures missing. Let's say there were 7 ksharim and only 5 Eidim. There were 5 ksharim and only 3 Eidim. Shmam, the reason why he avoided it is because with regard to Krovim, you can only be machshir with 1 korov and not 2. Okay, then, and here's where we'll stop.
Okay, Shkoya.
Okay, then. So, despite all the technological challenges, we did manage to learn the daf, and we much an hour. Okay, then. Let's have a great week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Okay.